All right, what's up, Texas basketball fam? I'm Keenan. He's Ari. Like the vid, subscribe to the channel. You know the deal.
We're talking Texas hoops today, baby.
We are
Keep
talking
Austin
Texas
Beard.
hoops today. Keep Austin Beard. That is right. Dylan DeSue loved the name. He came on the show yesterday. He was a big fan of that. I thought it was.
I
really
should have.
funny.
I had Chris Beard on SiriusXM this morning. I should have asked him what he thought of the name. He's awesome.
Yeah.
There are few people I like more than him. Not even just from a basketball perspective. You know, we talked in the past where he'd mentioned his Chinese buffet, the Chinese buffet stuff, and so I started off the interview asking about that. Like, what other wise thoughts from the road do you have? And he mentioned, which I think he's talked about McGriddles before. He loves McGriddles. And then the other thing he mentioned was timing and the importance of it. If you're going to eat at a gas station, you got to know when they put the corn dogs out so that like you get them right away when they're good, as opposed to like they've been sitting out there for 16 hours. So.
What a random thing to be an expert on. All right, let's start talking about Oklahoma State. So, pretty much everything that could have gone wrong in that game did go wrong. Double-digit turnovers. OSU had a terrible three-point percentage coming into the game, around 28%, and they lit it up from three. I think they shot 8 for 17. The offense was really ineffective, no rhythm, pretty slow. Oklahoma State kind of came out with all the energy. They had quick hands and passing lanes. They converted turnovers into points. Really just beat the Longhorns up the whole time. Keelan Boone was fantastic. He dominated. He had 17 points. And really overall, man, it was just a pretty poor showing. Texas turned the ball over 14 times and gave 18 points off of turnovers. And then OSU only turned the ball over 9 times, and Texas scored 8 points off of that. And Carr was 1 for 6 from the field for 4 points. So he kind of regressed in that game. But I think the main problem with the game, it was just an indication of their lack of intensity, is they got to the line 7 times versus Oklahoma State, who got to the line 23 times. And that's just, you can't win a game when the other team is shooting, almost 4 times as many free throws as you are.
Yeah, and this week, when you look at the win over Oklahoma and the loss to Oklahoma State, it's a great example of like the Big 12 in a nutshell. Oklahoma State's sort of a puzzling team, as we talked about in our preview show, because they don't have the postseason to play for, and so you've got to sort of wonder the motivation for a team that was trying to figure out and find something. They were in a really tough stretch at 7-5 before that win over Texas. And that's too talented of a basketball team to be losing that many games this early in the season. So I think it was just a combination of like, not, as you mentioned, not mentioning the intensity. This is a team that needed to win that game and knew it. Otherwise they're going to fall so far behind. And I think they had lost the first 3 games of Big 12 play to start. They had dropped like 5 of 6 or something. So, it was just, again, it was not, the way you just described it is a team that was flat and wasn't ready to play, and they go to a opposing team's home gym, and that team was ready and they're talented. The Boone twins can play, Likely can play, Avery Anderson can play, but they've got a lot of good players in that team. So it's a good basketball team. They're well coached. It was just a team that wasn't as motivated in Texas as Oklahoma State was, because Oklahoma State was on a bad run. Right.
Oklahoma State sort of had their backs against the wall and they played that way.
Exactly.
And it's funny because I was talking on the board with some guys about how this Oklahoma game on Tuesday, despite being this early on in the season, felt like a must win. Felt like a game that after that loss to Oklahoma State, you really can't come out flat, especially against your rivals. You really needed to come out with the energy, and they did bring the energy on their, props to them, because they came out and they played really hard and really well. But another note about Oklahoma State is Tre Mitchell was missing. And
what's the deal with Tre Mitchell?
So he was health and safety protocols on Saturday, and then he was on the roster to play on Tuesday, but he only played a couple of minutes and posted no stats. And so we asked Coach Beard in the post-game press conference what the deal was, and he basically said, yeah, he's just recovering a little bit. He'll be fine, though. He'll be back for Saturday. And Febres also didn't play, and they said he's a little banged up, but he'll also be back for Saturday.
Yeah, and we talked about early on in the season on this show, they just, Tre Mitchell's been their best, most consistent offensive player, him and Timmy Allen. So, that's when I saw Tre Mitchell was not available for the Oklahoma State game, it was like, oh, that's gonna be tough. Considering how difficult the offense has been.
Yeah, especially like if you watch the Seton Hall game, you can see what Tre Mitchell can do. He can occasionally take over a game offensively. And, the size thing is a big deal too, because Tre and Dylan are their two tallest guys at 6'9". Missing just one of those guys is tough, especially when Oklahoma State got 11 offensive rebounds. And that was kind of happening throughout the game with a lot of putbacks and tip-ins and stuff like that. They really just got out hustled. And the word of the week was aggressiveness. And they talked about that in the press conference on Monday, I believe. We said that word about 100 times. The media and the coach and Brock Cunningham were all like, yeah, we just weren't aggressive enough.
And then what happened on Tuesday?
Let's talk about that game.
They were aggressive.
They were very aggressive. They did a great job getting Oklahoma in foul trouble early. They came out way more motivated. It looked like a completely different team than what we saw.
Exact opposite of Saturday, which is living in the Big 12. Oklahoma was feeling good about themselves. They're coming off of a good stretcher. They played really good basketball. And Texas, needing a win, scrapping, figuring it out back at home after a tough loss on Saturday. It was role reversal completely on Tuesday as for Saturday.
Yeah, and it was really cool to be there because the crowd really showed out for that Texas OU game. It was really loud in there. It was the highest attendance of the year by far. I don't remember what the exact number is, but the crowd showed out and the players could feel it. You could tell they could feel it. You could tell that they were really fired up to win this game, not just because of the situation, but it's just a rivalry game. And, we asked Dylan yesterday on the Keep Austin Beard interview what the team felt about that. And he said Beard emphasized to them very heavily that this was a huge game. This is a rivalry game. This is a game you have to get up for. And if you're a Texas Longhorn, this is one of the biggest games of the year. And they came out and they played like that. And I think the biggest takeaway was defensively, they held Tanner Groves to 3 points the entire game. Yeah. He had no points in the first half. He had one field goal attempt and then he had one free throw.
Well, and he's been their key for OU. OU is, I think they have 3 guys from last year.
Yeah. Ton of transfers.
They have an entirely new roster with a brand new coach. So, what the job that Porter Moser has done is phenomenal, considering where they are. And he basically got hired and then had to go build a team now.
Yep.
And did that. And Groves is a huge piece to what they do, not only scoring, but distributing. We talked about bigs like Tre Mitchell, a kind of similar player. Mm-hmm. Obviously Mitchell, has more upside and more athleticism and whatnot, but initiate the offense from the elbow, good vision, good pass ability. So he's a similar player in that regard, but yeah, and the other thing too is the attendance. I know when you went to Texas, I'm sure you had a lot of things to say about the attendance or lack thereof at Texas games. I went to Kansas, and so attendance for football or for basketball games was never an issue.
Right.
And, but even when I worked for the Horn and lived in Austin, I used to go to basketball games all the time. And it was and nobody cared. And I remember, hosting a show with Sean Adams, and he used to say, because it's basketball season year round at Texas, it's football season year round at Texas. They just don't care about basketball. And Chris Beard has gotten people to care about basketball. This is an immediate thing we're seeing here, even in the era of COVID where people might be afraid to go to public spaces. What he's done this year in terms of engaging with the student body, the Gregory Gym game, preaching to fans, the importance. It is really incredible what he's done in a short period of time. Cause I was always under the impression no, basketball will never be not successful, but basketball will never be a huge deal at Texas because it's football year round. And it's still, I'm not trying to diminish football, still the beast, but it was, of course, even in attendance, it was you'd go to these games, you'd be like, nobody cares. Football's not even playing and nobody cares.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I think a big part of it, like you said, is his engagement with the student body and the unite the family and just bringing people back. And it was really cool, man. I ran into about 10 of my friends at that game who ran up to the media section and said, hey.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great, man. It was so much fun. The place was doing the "Oh, you sucks." They're doing that chant like super loud at the end of the game.
That's the thing is, it's not only have these games not been well attended, but like the crowd, like again, going to Kansas and then going to like Texas basketball, it was like polar opposites.
Right.
But like, and you can hear it in the television broadcast, just the difference, of like, wow, that sounds like a college basketball game.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll be interesting to see what the crowds and sound looks like in the Moody Center next year. I don't know that it will be, Fog Allen, but if they could, increase the average attendance, I mean, that's just a huge selling point for recruits as well.
And look, I can't wait to see what this thing looks like. I mean, I've been to the Irwin Center a ton of times, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think next year they're gonna blow it away with attendance because it's gonna be an emphasis. It's a brand new building, so I think like people will be incentivized. And the thing is, like, I'm a big believer in Chris Beard as a long-term winner, and so you win, you'll have people show up, and so I think it'll roll downhill. But I mean, next year I think it'll be great attendance because it's always like that in year one in a new building, and the team should be good. So we'll see.
Yeah. So a little bit more about the actual game, though. So, like I said, they controlled Tanner Groves the entire time, but really the standout was Andrew Jones, who went for 22 points. He was phenomenal.
Hi, Andrew. Welcome back. Good to see you.
I know. He looked like he did as a sophomore again. And he just really took over the game. He was hitting threes. He was driving the lane. He was hitting mid-range jump shots. And you can tell that team gets really fired up when he does well because he's clearly a leader on that team.
An emotional leader. We obviously know the history of him is well documented. I was asked on the Horn this week about, do they need Andrew Jones to score 22 points a game? And my answer was no, but they need their guards to get more involved. Like if it's Andrew Jones, if it's Marcus Carr, if it's Courtney Ramey, Fabris. I mean, even your boy, what's his name, started to play a little bit more credible basketball, Askew. So
yeah.
They just need their guards to score more.
Yeah.
Whether it's Andrew Jones or whoever, and preferably it's got to be Marcus Carr, I would think, right?
Yeah, he had 9. He didn't have a great game, but when Andrew Jones is taking over, I can sort of let that slide. You just need to have at least one of your guards going off because you're going to get the consistent points from Timmy Allen, from Tre, from Dessou, from Christian Bishop, who also has been really impressive to me as of late. Love his energy off the bench. He led the Big East in field goal percentage last year, which is crazy because he's not 7 foot, he's 6'7", and he plays forward. But he shot like over 70% from the field last year. I mean, it was mostly dunks, but just the fact that he's been getting himself in position to make those plays is really impressive.
Well, that's what, I mean, you said it right there. If you lead a conference, and a conference as good as the Big East is in field goal percentage, traditionally that's Udoka Azubuike, or a 7-foot guy that's back to the basket, and you dump it down at him and he dunks. So a 6'7" guy, there's a craftiness to it. There's a it's the moves, it's the post moves, it's the ability to get open and get those looks. And yeah, he's starting to play more and more. And I think Chris Beard's getting a better idea of what his rotation needs to look like. Certainly when it comes to guys coming off the bench, and Bishop, as you mentioned, just that's the type of player you need off the bench: energy, scoring, efficiency. And that's what you get from him.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just like in general with the forwards. I mean, they're the key to this team. And it's sort of unfortunate that they don't have like an actual center, like a 7-footer, a Musa Cease type, like what Oklahoma State has, but they're getting it done with those forwards playing in position. And what I also like that I saw was the amount of turnovers they forced early on. Like they only allowed 6 points through the first 11 minutes of the first half against Oklahoma.
Yeah. I want to preview Iowa State. Anything else on the 2 games this week?
No, I just want to say I was impressed, and it was a huge bounce back for them, and they desperately needed to win that game going away, and they did. So
I agree.
It looked good, I think.
Well, and we saw this week in the Big 12, right? We had expectations and perceptions of certain teams. On Saturday, a lot of those perceptions and expectations blew up, and there were upsets. And then on Tuesday, Baylor loses at home.
Yeah.
So it's like the Big 12 is really good. It's a cliche to say it at this point. We know that, but it just goes to show you in a week, You can have like Texas Tech beat Kansas and Baylor at home, and you can have Oklahoma State beat Texas, but then Texas go home and beat Oklahoma. I mean, it's just up is down, left is right. You just don't know. It's hard to project who's going to win these given games. And so I'm sure for Chris Beard, it's just a matter of like, hey, know that like if we're playing K-State's probably a bottom feeder, but that's still a tough out.
Yeah.
There's no Nebraskas. There's just no really bad teams here.
Yeah. And honestly, it makes it for a very exciting season because you really don't know, like it's the most fun conference to watch. The Big Ten is probably second because they have so many individual talents like Coburn and, right. Edey and all those guys, but the Big 12 has the best teams. It's not even a question. And even their top teams are getting beat by teams you wouldn't think were the top, like you said, Tech over Baylor. And Iowa State is another one of those teams that's highly rated, that plays really well. I mean, they lost to OU by 13 on the road, but again, that's a road game. And road games are really tough in this conference. And they barely lost to Kansas on Tuesday. I mean, barely. They played Kansas super tight in Fog Allen. So Iowa State is no joke. And this is going to be a really tough road game. But I actually do think, Isaiah Brockington is fantastic. The Penn State transfer for Iowa State. He's probably their best player. He's their leading scorer. I believe their leading rebounder as well. But that's the type of game that really could go either way. I think Iowa State will probably be favored, but I think Texas could go in there, and if they play like they did against OU, force turnovers, control the paint, things like that, they have as good a shot as anybody to beat Iowa State on the road. Yeah,
so in Iowa State probably should have beaten Kansas. There was a really, even as a Kansas fan, a really bad no call on a goaltend down the stretch of this game. A layup was clearly taken out of the cylinder or blocked off the backboard, I should say, by Dave McCormick, that they didn't, I don't know. Can they not review that? I didn't understand why they didn't review it. It was very confusing.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the rules on what you can and can't review. I should probably learn that.
In a game that ends up as a 1-point game.
Complex, yeah.
Right. Like that's huge.
You would think that would be the point of it.
Right. And especially for a goaltend in the final minute of the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, TJ Otzelberger, what he's done in a very short period of time is incredible. They did not win a conference game last year.
Yep.
They were 0-for, including in the Big 12 tournament. And they started off with a loss in Big 12 play. And then they ended that long losing streak. They're similar to Texas. I think they're well coached. They defend really well. They can pick you up. They can play the entire floor and pick you up full court. They cause havoc that way. They don't turn the ball over a ton. They've got, I'd say maybe the difference is Texas has more firepower on offense. Brockington was incredible down the stretch for that against Kansas, but Caleb Grill's a guy that can shoot.
Mm-hmm.
They've got Tristan Enaruna, who's a former Jayhawk, who's kind of an interesting player for them. And then they've got Tyrese Hunter at point guard, who's a true freshman running the point for them, who's a very impressive player too, especially as a true freshman. So good team. Hilton Coliseum's a really tough place to play.
Yeah.
One of the tougher, more underrated venues in all of the Big 12 in college basketball. Maybe if you have expectations that Texas will win this game, I just don't know. This one could go either way, as you mentioned. And at this point, based on how good and even a lot of these teams are, I'm just going to default to the home team.
Yeah, that's a totally fair take. And another thing, sort of going off what you said about Otzelberger, they lost two really good players to the transfer portal this year. Razier Bolton and Jalen Coleman-Lands both left. So the fact that they were able to rebuild that quickly is super impressive and just an indication of how good Otzelberger actually is.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's funny because it's like Kansas and Iowa State traded Tristan Enaruna for Jalen Coleman-Lands. Jalen Coleman-Lands now in Kansas.
Right.
I think he's been in like 5 different schools. And then Gabe Kalsher is the other kid. Did he play with Marcus Carr? Was he from Minnesota?
What team? What year?
I think Gabe Kalsher of Iowa State is a Minnesota transfer.
Interesting.
But no, it should be a fun one.
Yeah.
And then who does Texas have next week during the week?
Let me see. I just have their schedule pulled up.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Either way, I think Iowa State really could end up. Oh, they play Kansas State on Tuesday at home.
There you go.
So that's a winnable game. I mean, it'd be huge if they could pull off this Iowa State win. I think that they can, and I think that they probably will. Just because, I'm predicting that they're going to win this game. It's going to be super close. They're not going to do what they did to OU to Iowa State, but I think that they're going to pull this one out. And then they should take care of business against Kansas State, and then you're 5-1 in conference.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, remember those issues that we thought they had?
Yeah.
Although I'm picking them to lose because I'm just, again, think these teams are evenly matched, well coached. Hilton Coliseum's tough.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right, guys, that should do it for Keep Boston Beard this week. Appreciate you, Ari.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Remember
go Cowboys.
Go Cowboys. Exactly. I got my Cowboys jacket on. Super excited about that. But remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we appreciate y'all.